Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Morgenthaler, and this is Roy
I'm Roy
Huesman.
Huesman.
Hi, Roy. How you doing today?
Hi, good.
Good,
How are
good.
you?
We're a little rusty after the holidays here.
We're fresh back from the
Exactly.
holidays, our first webinar after Christmas, and it's great to be here with everybody. We are doing a webinar as a direct response to several questions that we've had in our Facebook group, the Epson F2100 DTG users group. We'll have a slide for you at the, oh, there we have a slide right there. Yeah, so we get a lot of questions in this user group on this Facebook page. It's closed, so you have to ask to be invited in. We let you in, but this is a great opportunity in this user group to ask questions from actual users. Roy and Jay and I might jump in once in a while. Honestly, I don't get on Facebook that much, but I've seen Roy get on there a lot, and he'll help out. But really, what we want is this group to be a source of information from you guys to interact with each other, so that if somebody has a question, maybe one of you have seen it differently than we have, and you have a solution that we haven't seen before. So this is just a great user group for you guys to interact together. Well, we've seen several questions pop up recently. We wanted to address those. And Roy, one of the main things that people have been asking about are nozzle checks. Now, it seems like for some of us who have been around a long time, a nozzle check is kind of basic, but we have a lot of users, Roy, that are on every level of the learning curve, right? We have brand new people to the industry that have never printed before on direct to garment, and they've never printed with large format printing, and they don't even know what a nozzle check is, all the way through people who have had multiple direct to garment printers and don't really need any help from us. So we're kind of going to go back to the basics a little bit today and talk about those nozzle checks. We might get off track a little bit, but in a constructive way. We have some other questions we'll go over. But let me turn the time over to you, Roy, and why don't you talk about nozzle checks for us for a little bit?
Okay. Well, the first thing I think that's most important is once you get comfortable. The nozzle check is a requirement when you boot up the machine. It's on the card with the printer that you get. First thing that you do, turn it on, shake your white ink, do a nozzle check, and clean the nozzles that are missing. That's 1, 2, 3 first things on that chart. A lot of people, what they find is because the machine does such a good job cleaning itself that they get good nozzle checks most of the time, and so they start neglecting looking at them. And then things start snowballing out of control at that point, because once nozzles are clogged for a period of time, it's hard to get them back. And then you end up in this situation. It usually runs around the time where people just run out of their 1-year warranty. And then, they've gone through this year where the machine's been running great. And then all of a sudden they've neglected their nozzles, and then they got to replace their head at that point. So it's really important, regardless if it's a good nozzle check every day, every time you turn the printer on, that's the first thing that you're going to do. It's the thing that's going to guarantee the quality of the print for the day, or the prints for the day. The same as when you're pre-treating, not to get off on a tangent in that direction, but your pre-treater needs to be maintained properly. Those are the two key components in getting quality prints time after time, is maintaining your equipment. If you do a good job with that, you're going to start out your day with everything functioning properly.
All right, perfect.
So if I think Jay can show up a nozzle check, that way people can see what a nozzle check looks like.
While you're getting to that, Roy, just wanted to just clarify. So making it a habit every day, checking it, even when you're confident it's going to be good, you just need to know and just make sure you're doing it religiously every day. That's
correct. You still need to do it, period. So if you're looking at this specific nozzle check, there's a white in WH2 you can see is missing. It's basically an angled line that are stair steps. And then you can see on the black far bottom right-hand corner, there's a nozzle missing. And then there's actually one up at the top on the magenta, which it's hard to see when you're taking a picture of this. The other thing to keep in mind, and I have had customers call, because Epson's machine tells you to put a piece of paper down. When you're running white ink doesn't show up on paper. So you want to make sure that you're using either a plexiglass, printing directly on the plexiglass of a platen. If you only have one platen and you're running your mat that Epson has provided you on the newer F2100s, then you need to print your nozzle check on a piece of Mylar, or the easiest thing to do is to run a 2-inch piece of packaging tape across the center of the platen, just a hair closer to the mouth of the machine, because you can see that line of type there with the serial number, the date, the version of firmware that's on the machine. That needs to print just below. So it's typically going to run off a 2-inch piece of tape if you don't move it a little closer to the mouth of the printer. So it's definitely important that you do it and look at it. And I tell people that if you print one and there is a nozzle missing on the white, and usually the whites kind of work themselves out during the day. If there's 1 or 2 missing out of the 4 channels, unless I'm going through a storage mode, a tube wash, or replace white ink, I may neglect those for a day, just a couple of them though, out of the 4 channels, and then check them the next day. So I'll hang the tape on the back of the printer. If they're in the same place, I'm going to address them the next day. If they're not, and they're all great the next day, or there's one missing somewhere else, I'll go ahead and address it. But when it comes to the colors, you have to address those when they arise, because the colors typically don't clog. If they're clogged, there's a reason for it. So the whites tend to, clog here and there, and then they flush out. So definitely want to stay on top of that.
All right. So what you're saying is, when you see, like in that picture, just 1 or 2 lines that are missing, you're not really going to worry that much about those unless you see it a second day in a row, right?
On the white. On the colors, I address them instantly, because like I said, the color inks are less likely to clog, and if they're clogged, then there's usually a problem with the nozzles, and they need to be addressed. Otherwise, you may not get those nozzles back. The one thing to keep in mind too, and that we get a lot of calls on, is that I've done medium nozzle checks, I've done heavy nozzle checks, and all this stuff, and I can't get my nozzles to come back. You got to turn your machine on, okay, at least every 2 weeks, week and a half to 2 weeks. There are people that will go 3 weeks or try to stretch it to 4 weeks. You can't do that, especially if you're out of warranty. You're going to end up replacing your head for sure. So you definitely want to have some way to remind yourself to turn that printer on if you're not using it. The other thing is if you're going through and say you have a nozzle or 2 missing and you do a light clean, okay, whether you do it by selecting the nozzle or doing all the nozzles at the same time, after you do that light clean and you're not successful, I tell customers do another nozzle check, and if it's still bad, go to a medium clean, okay? If it doesn't work at that point, most people will go and do a heavy and then another heavy and another heavy, and before you know it, they've wasted a bunch of ink and they're still not opening up their nozzles. And that's usually because they're not maintaining their suction cap. If your suction cap is maintained properly, meaning minimum once a week you're cleaning it, you're going to get good suction. If you don't have good suction, you're not going to get your nozzles clean. So when you go from a light clean to a nozzle check, and you still have to now go to a medium clean and a nozzle check, and you're still missing a couple nozzles, don't go to a heavy. Go and clean your suction cap. If you clean it properly, make sure it's functioning properly, Then most likely after that's done, you go back and do another medium, and 99.9% of the time, you're going to have perfect nozzles again. So you got to stay on top of that suction cap. And those are the most important things in cleaning the printer altogether. So if you can stay on top of those things, which is fairly easy, doesn't take much time, and we're literally talking about a minute before you start your production for the day. So as far as going through cleaning cycles, that may take a little bit of time, but you're not standing in front of the machine. As far as you standing and doing something, we're really talking about a minute.
Okay, great. Mike asked a great question here, and this was actually on my list, so I want to throw it at you right here. And you mentioned turning the printer off. So so his question is, I typically leave my machine on, and I assume he does that so that it can circulate ink. Is there any advantage to turning it off at the end of the day? So if you don't,
you must turn it off at the end of the day. You must turn it off at the end of the day. There's a disadvantage of leaving the printer on. What happens is there's a lot of people on the internet that say, oh, turn your startup cleaning off and just leave the printer on, okay? Well, if you leave the printer on, every 12 hours it goes through a cleaning cycle, whether you're using it or not. So that's wasting ink. If you are worried about the startup clean's purpose is to get a perfect nozzle check as soon as the machine is completely booted up. That's the whole process behind that. And the amount of time that it takes to do the startup clean varies depending on how long the machine's been off and how many shirts you printed the day before. The machine keeps pretty good track of how much usage it has gone through as far as cycles of cleaning itself and things like that throughout the day. It's like the 6-hour cleaning clock that's on the front of the machine. If you go through 6 hours of production, and that is straight print time, it's going to go through a self-cleaning and maintenance cycle. I tell customers, if you're doing one of those a day, go ahead and turn off your startup cleaning, because you're going through enough ink and the machine's cleaning itself enough throughout the day to where you probably don't need to do that. But if you're not going through a 6-hour cycle a day, then leave the startup cleaning on. And if you're concerned about that little bit of ink that you're using during the startup every day, then don't turn the printer on every day. If you're that strapped for cash, set print days. Do it Tuesday and Thursday if you're not that busy that week, or do them Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, rather than turning it on every single day. Now, the disadvantage to leaving the printer on the whole time is it's designed to do a flush when it shuts down. With the older machines, the prior generation, the 2000, you had to manually do what they call a tube flush, okay? And then you'd run a tube wash solution through the suction cap to keep that pump and the suction at its optimum, okay? And keep those lines clear from a buildup of white ink. And that was done daily every time you shut off the machine. Well, this machine is designed to, when you shut the machine off, it goes through that flushing cycle with the cleaning cartridge. That's what the cleaning cartridge is there for. And then on the boot up, it goes through a startup clean cycle on the head itself to get that optimal when you're getting ready to print for the day. So if you're not doing those two functions, it's not going to function properly. It's not going to keep the suction cap open and pumping properly. Now, if you leave it on constantly, it does do a periodic suction cap flush, but it isn't the same as turning it off every day when you're done using it. And again, you will end up using more ink leaving it on when you're not using it than if you just turn it on when you need to use it and just let it do the startup clean on its own.
Thank you, Roy. So let me just give you a follow-up question about that. And this is also for my own personal knowledge. When you leave it on, I guess what some people are wondering is, doesn't the machine need to recycle the ink or cycle the ink around to keep it mixed. Is that important? Or I guess you're saying that you can leave it off for a period of time and then that's not too important.
Well, basically, the white ink does get recirculated through the system. The colors do not. So as far as any type of inkjet system out in the industry, like the home units, the solvent machines, professional machines, those, and even the dye sublimation, those are all made to stay on, okay, because they maintain and go through different cycles of maintenance as far as the head goes. You can schedule your head maintenance. And typically, most of those printers, other than the solvents or the EcoSolves, are running an aqueous type of ink, which tend to clog less than, say, a solvent, or even, most of all, the white ink is our challenge in the DTG arena. So with those machines, they take care of themselves. With this, we're dealing with a whole different dynamic. The suction pump assembly is a big issue with DTG, and making sure that that suction cap and pump are going to get good suction day after day after day. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we don't have a buildup of white ink in those hoses and in that pump assembly. So it has to be flushed. And with the evolution of Epson's technology in the head and the ink itself, it's designed to sit off, and Epson even says you can let the machine sit off for up to 2 weeks. That is it. That's the hurdle, or the top of the hill, so to speak. So you don't want to go beyond that, because then you're going into uncharted territory. When it comes to different states, different climates, different humidities, you may have a little bit more time versus other states, but I just say, hey, a week and a half to 2 weeks maximum, make sure you turn that machine off. You don't even have to print. Just turn it on, go through your startup cycle, which is in your chart, shake the white ink, let the machine boot up and go through its cleaning cycle, do a nozzle check, and then go ahead and clean the nozzles that are clogged. After that, there's been many times the printer that we have here is over 3 years old, and it's sat 2 weeks off for many times, even in a row, where we've went ahead, turned it off, never even printed a shirt, just let it sit on for a couple hours to let the white recycle. Because when those recycle pumps come on, or I shouldn't say recycle, recirculation pumps come on, it's only the white that's being recirculated. The colors are never recirculated. The only thing that the colors do get, and if you follow your chart, is to shake them once a month, the cartridges themselves. And that leads into some of the people in the industry that have said that once you put the cartridges in the machine on the Epson, that the shelf life goes to a 6-month period, even though it's 2 months on the cartridge itself. Well, those cartridges are actually air sealed, or I should say there's no air that's going to ever get into those cartridges. Even with the white ink, when you pull them out and you shake them, there's no white ink flying around coming out of the cartridge. It's actually sealed back up. So no air is ever hitting that ink until it's expelled from the nozzles on the head. So the 2-year shelf life is a 2-year shelf life from the date of manufacture on that cartridge, regardless if it's in the machine or out of the machine.
Awesome. Hey, Roy, is it possible for you to show us live how you print on that 2-inch tape when we have the mat on the, were you planning on doing that?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, great. While you're moving over there and getting set up, we're going to ask another question. Maybe you can answer it while you're moving over there.
Okay.
If somebody is only using CMYK ink, they're not using white. We have a few clients who don't use white ink. Do they just put cleaning cartridges in those white ink slots?
Yes, you can do that. And that would be under your maintenance, under replace white ink mode. Okay, so the one thing you want to make sure that you do, if you ever want to go back to use white ink, because I mean that's a possibility because you set the machine up that way. Then you want to make sure that you've definitely done the boot up cycle, done a nozzle check, and made sure all nozzles are firing. You're not going to neglect any this time. And I would recommend that you do a suction cap clean before you actually even do your nozzle check and your cleaning cycles to make sure all the nozzles are firing. Because if you take the white ink out of the machine and put cleaning solution in, you're not going to be watching those channels anymore. And if any of them were clogged going into taking the white ink out and putting the cleaning solution in, those channels will be gone forever if you wait 3, 4, 5 months before you put white ink back into the machine. So anyway, how you do the nozzle check with the 2-inch packing tape, I'll go ahead and bring the camera over here so you can kind of see better. So you have your center position where you know your nozzles are going to print, or your nozzle check's going to print. You have your center point, and then I move my tape about 1/4 of an inch closer to the mouth of the machine, okay, when I go ahead and do that. So what I do tell customers when I'm training them, I don't want to be responsible for you printing on your nice, clean, fresh mat. So just put 2 pieces of tape for the first time, and then take a pin after you see the line that has the date and the serial number and all that information on it. Just put a little tick mark with a ballpoint pen on the edge of the canvas. That way you can line the tape up to it the next time and you don't have that issue. Don't wrap the tape underneath, just let it hang off. And then you just go ahead and go through a nozzle check real quick. And here's an older one. So this is one that was on 2 pieces of tape when I was doing a training showing the customer how to do that. So if there isn't any nozzles missing, I won't even save it. If there is, I can go ahead and save the tape for the next day and just hang it on the back of the machine. So here is today's nozzle check, which it's kind of hard to see on the camera, but you can easily see here with the printer. Or I should say, if you want to look at it in the white light, I mean, not the white light, but to see a better contrast, you can do that by just setting it up on the printer. So I am missing one little white spot down there in the corner. So I don't know if you could
which is
even see
amazing,
that.
Roy. Just to point out real quick that we've never replaced the print head on that printer in almost 4 years now. I think it's been. I had a client mention, or somebody in here mentioned that she prints on blue tape, and she's able to see all the colors. I don't know how cyan shows up on blue tape, but I don't know if you've ever tried blue.
But, you know, either way, that blue would be, I guess, the printer or painter's tape. The thing is, I think at the end of the day, everybody's got packing tape. Everybody's packing their shirts to ship out.
True.
And the clear tape is fairly inexpensive and easy to put on there. So either way, whichever works for you. The one thing that I have had is I have had customers actually print on paper, and usually those are customers that ended up getting trained by a competitor and called up and said they were having issues and find out that they're printing on paper. So there's no way to see what white channels are clogged. It turned out almost half their whites were clogged. He ended up having to get a new head. So once you get to a point where the head's too far gone, there's nothing you can do. So you definitely want to stay on top of the nozzle checks, and it only takes a minute. It's really important to keeping that machine running and functioning properly. The head is the most important part of the printer. So,
Thanks, Roy. That was perfect. By the way, if anybody has questions, you can put those into the chat or the Q&A section of this webinar. We're kind of getting here at the end, and I don't see a lot of questions, which is good. I mean, that means that you were very clear and explained a lot, Roy. Um, let's see if we have any others pop up. Doesn't look like we do. So anything extra you would like to add before we sign off for today?
No, I think that we covered all those. I was just looking at the sheet of paper there. Yep, definitely. It's fairly easy to do. If you stay on top of the cleaning process, you're going to definitely get good prints. And I guess other things for another day when it comes to other products or shirts or things that come up as far as the sleeve platen, dual sleeve platen. We'll be doing something on that in the near future. We just released the template today. If you need it, please get in touch with us and we can get that emailed over to you.
Yeah, somebody actually just asked a question about the sleeve platen. Is that the only way to print on sleeves is using the sleeve platen? And I don't know of another way, but we'll definitely dive into that deeper.
Actually, I can answer that today. If you use one of our platens that has the frame around it, there is the ability to print on that. You may have to kind of do some testing here and there, but you can run some sleeves across the platen area. There'll be gaps, obviously. But like I said, it's kind of a trial and error. The thing that's most critical with our sleeve platen is there's a little channel for the back side of the sleeve where your seam's going to be. And if you don't have that channel, you're going to have to move your platen height further or your platen position further away, which may cause issues with the quality of the print at the end of the day. So definitely want to keep that in mind.
Okay.
I think there was another question that popped up there.
Yeah, something about white spots. And, this is an opportunity for us to point out that on our website, we have a support page when you have something unusual happen. Like I've never even heard of that tech issue, but you can fill out a form on our tech page and one of the techs will get back to you right away. And the great thing about our support is that we support everybody, even if you purchase from a competitor of ours, just because we know that if we take care of you, you're gonna come back to us and buy ink. So we're happy to help everybody. We do have sleeve platens in stock, I think. We can check with you on that later. Also wanted to point out, Roy, that a lot of what you told us today is stuff that you go over in training when you purchase the printer from us. Is that correct?
Yes, I go through all that stuff. That's the most important thing that we start the training with is how to take care of your equipment. And I would say I spend, time flies when you're going over everything. But if you purchase a speed treater from us and a printer, the whole training before we even get started with the software is going to probably be at least an hour, maybe a little bit over, depending on how many questions the customer has. But I think it's really important that people understand their equipment, and it's not a situation where you drive off the lot with a brand new car and you're afraid to open the hood and look underneath and see what the engine looks like because you're, all these cables and what have you. You got to be comfortable to look at your equipment, and you got to be comfortable to know when it's operating properly. And again, if it's not, you're not going to print any type of quality whatsoever. So it all starts with good working equipment and equipment that's maintained properly.
All right, perfect. Looks like we have some other questions on different topics here. I'm not real clear on this one about suggestions for guide or any suggestions guide regarding platen printing border compared to GC border. Does the GC print area border correspond to the platen border edge?
No, it does not. So the Garment Creator border is a little bit different as you get close to the edge of where if you have your frame showing, the teal frame, there is a margin, a slight margin, and it's generally about a 1/16 of an inch. And if you actually measure the platens themselves, they're 16.5 by 14.5, the ones that you receive from Epson. So they're a 1/2 inch larger in each direction. So when you're looking at our dual sleeve platen, our actually platen area for the sleeve is right at 16 inches wide. If you're looking at our hoodie platen, the width is 10 by 16. It's right at 16 inches, which means that we're able to print all the way to almost the edge of the platen itself. With the Epsons, you can't do that. You will actually get cut off at a certain point.
All right. I think we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you, Roy. Super informative as always. You're the best in the industry and we really appreciate it. That's why we love doing this. I would like to encourage everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we have a lot of training and support videos where we cover a lot of information. Here's our contact information for Equipment Zone, for Terry Combs, for me, Jeff Morgenthaler, for Amy. If you would like to hear from Roy, I mentioned that we have that tech support page on our website where you can fill out the form with your information and put in there an issue that you need help with. And that will create a tech ticket for a technician to contact you. A lot of times it is you, Roy. And then,
yeah, well, no, sometimes I do more training and other things, but
that's
I
true.
at
You are
least
doing
get
a lot of training.
probably 1 or 2 days in a 2-week span. So,
Yeah.
But if there's something that's specific to me, then you could try to get a hold of me, and I will get back to you when I am available, or just ask if it's something that's not time where you're kind of in a bind or something and you want to speak with me directly, just put a tech ticket now and tell them that you want to talk to me. And then when I'm available, I'll get back to you.
Perfect. And for those of you who are watching this, if you are not a member of the Epson F2100 DTG users group on Facebook, please go look that up and request to become a member, and we'll approve you. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to be able to provide input on some of the things that you've seen or some of the things that you do. You can put pictures in there of stuff that you've done. We love all that type of input. So we would appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending. Thank you, Roy. And until next time,
Thank you.
Talk. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.